It may be the oldest crop humanity ever grew. It made the world's first paper. It clothed armies and rigged the ships that discovered continents. A car was once built from it, said to be 10 times stronger than steel. It can even pull poison from radioactive soil. And then, at the peak of its promise, it was suddenly banned and almost erased from history. Why? By the end of this, you will know exactly who buried this plant and why. This is the secret history of hemp. First, forget what you think you know. The hemp we are talking about is not a drug. It is a variety of the cannabis plant bred purely for fiber and seed, containing almost none of the compound that affects the mind. For thousands of years, this was simply one of the most useful industrial plants on the entire planet. That distinction will matter enormously later. Remember it. Its power lies hidden in the stalk. Hemp grows at an almost unbelievable speed, shooting several meters into the sky in just a few months, ready to harvest in around 120 days. Compare that to a tree, which needs decades. And packed inside that fast-growing stalk is an exceptionally high amount of cellulose, the raw material of strong fiber, paper, and even plastic. Humanity's bond with this plant is staggeringly old, older than almost any other crop. Hemp is believed to be one of the first plants our ancestors ever cultivated, and quite possibly the very first ever spun into cloth. Some archaeological traces of hemp fabric reach back many thousands of years, to the deep roots of civilization itself. The story truly begins in ancient China, the homeland of hemp. There it was grown and woven into rope and cloth over 4,000 years ago. To the ancient Chinese, hemp was a material as fundamental as grain, so central to life that it was considered one of the essential fibers of their entire world. And in China, hemp handed humanity one of its greatest gifts of all. Around 2,000 years ago, a court official named Kai Luan is credited with inventing paper. And the world's first true paper was made largely from hemp. The invention that would carry all of human knowledge forward was born from this single plant. Think about the weight of that. Before hemp paper, ideas were trapped on heavy, rare, expensive surfaces. After it, knowledge could spread. Some of the oldest surviving pieces of paper on Earth, carrying ancient words across 2,000 years, were made from hemp. This plant did not just clothe civilization. It helped civilization remember itself. From China, hemp spread across the ancient world, and everywhere it went, it became indispensable, especially at sea. Because hemp fiber has a rare and precious quality, it resists rot, even against salt water. And that single property would put hemp at the heart of global history. Here is a fact that reshaped the world. For centuries, the great sailing empires ran on hemp. The ropes, the rigging, and above all the sails of the ships that crossed the oceans and discovered new continents were made from hemp. When Columbus sailed, his ships carried tons of it. Without this plant, the age of exploration itself might never have happened. Hemp was so vital to naval power that rulers made growing it the law. In England, King Henry VIII ordered landowners to grow hemp, fining those who refused. An empire's survival could depend on having enough of this fiber to keep its navy at sea. Hemp was not just a crop. It was a strategic weapon of state. The plant carried right into the birth of nations. In colonial America, hemp was so valuable it could be used to pay taxes. Founding figures like George Washington and Thomas Jefferson grew it on their own land. This ancient fiber was woven, quite literally, into the founding of the United States. And here begins the first great mystery of our story. Because a plant this useful, this ancient, this essential to paper, cloth, rope, and empires, should have remained one of the most important crops on Earth forever. Instead, in the 20th century, it was about to be pushed toward the edge of extinction. Hold that question. Why? But before the fall, hemp reached one last, astonishing peak. And it centers on one of the most famous names in industrial history, Henry Ford. Because Ford, the man who put the world on wheels, had a dream that sounds almost impossible. He wanted to grow automobiles from the soil. In 1941, Ford unveiled an experimental car with a body built from plant-based materials, including hemp fiber. And the legend that grew around it was extraordinary. It was said to be far lighter than steel, yet so tough it could take a hammer blow or an impact many times greater than a steel car without denting. Ford reportedly ran it on fuel derived from plants as well. A car grown partly from a field, lighter, and in some tellings far more impact-resistant than metal, fueled by agriculture instead of oil. In 1938, a major magazine had already declared hemp the coming billion-dollar crop, listing tens of thousands of possible products. Hemp stood on the edge of a revolution that could have reshaped the entire modern economy. And then it all vanished. The billion-dollar crop was crushed. Ford's plant car became a forgotten curiosity. Hemp, one of humanity's oldest and most useful partners, was driven into the shadows and nearly wiped from memory. This is the great mystery at the heart of our story. What happened? Who buried hemp and why? To solve it, we have to go back to the 1930s, to a collision of powerful industries and enormous money. Because in exactly the years that hemp was poised to explode, brand new technologies were being born that hemp directly threatened. And the men behind them had fortunes to lose. Consider what was happening. New machines had finally made processing hemp fiber cheap and efficient, threatening to unleash its full potential. But at the very same moment, the wood and paper industry was heavily invested in timber. And a chemical giant had just patented a revolutionary new synthetic fiber called nylon, along with new ways of making paper and plastic from other sources. Now look at what cheap, abundant hemp threatened. It threatened the timber and paper empires. It threatened the brand new synthetic fiber industry. It threatened plastics made from oil. Hemp could make paper, cloth, rope, and plastic cheaply from a plant that grows back in a single season. To powerful, entrenched industries, this ancient plant was not a wonder. It was a deadly competitor. Then, in 1937, came the blow. A law was passed in the United States that placed a heavy tax and crushing regulations on all cannabis. Officially, it was aimed at the drug. But industrial hemp, the harmless fiber plant with almost none of the mind-altering compound, was swept up in the very same law. And here is the crucial trick. The public was largely encouraged not to distinguish between the two. This is the key to the whole mystery, the distinction from the very beginning of our story. Industrial hemp and the drug variety are different plants, grown for entirely different purposes. But by blurring them together under one frightening name, the useful fiber crop could be strangled alongside the drug. To grow hemp for rope or paper now required special government permission that was almost impossible to get. Whether it was a deliberate conspiracy of a few powerful men, or simply the crushing momentum of industries protecting their profits, the result was identical. One of the most useful plants in human history was effectively outlawed in its own heartland, tangled up with a drug it barely resembled. The billion-dollar crop was dead, and most people never even knew what had been taken from them. There was one brief revival. During the Second World War, when Japan cut off vital fiber supplies, the very same government suddenly begged farmers to grow hemp again, releasing a film called Hemp for Victory. For a moment, hemp was a patriotic hero. But when the war ended, the bans slammed back down, and hemp returned to the shadows once more. So the plant that made paper, sailed the oceans, and helped found nations was quietly erased, not because it failed, but perhaps because it was too useful, too cheap, and too threatening to the right people at the wrong time. That is the answer to our first great mystery. But two more remained. Because the deeper science of hemp is only now being rediscovered, and it is astonishing. Here is a secret buried by that long prohibition. Hemp has an almost supernatural ability to clean poisoned earth. Scientists call it phytoremediation. Hemp's roots can pull toxic heavy metals and pollutants out of contaminated soil, storing them in the plant, leaving the ground cleaner.